It's Halloween, and as a special treat, I've chosen the most terrifying film I've ever seen. It's not a horror film in the conventional sense, but it's a film that I'm a little bit obsessed with, if I'm honest. I almost didn't have kids because of this film.
They've done it.
The film was called Threads. It's no exaggeration to say that this film traumatised an entire generation. Therefore, I would genuinely counsel caution to anyone before they watched it.
Rose, be careful with that, love.
But at the same time, I think it's absolutely essential viewing for every adult. Some horrors aren't imaginary. We live with them every day. And in 1984, the BBC decided to show us exactly what they look like.
It's the height of the Cold War. The Americans have deployed nuclear missiles in Europe, and CND marches fill British streets. These are a regular occurrence on the daily news. The Protect and Survive leaflets slide through people's letterboxes.
In Moscow, hundreds of thousands of people attended the traditional May Day parade.
And every news bulletin feels like we're one step away from World War III.
Many of the floats in the parade carried anti-American slogans aimed at President Reagan's nuclear policy.
Inside, the BBC, a quiet rebellion is brewing. Producers and writers who want to confront the public with the real consequences of nuclear war.
The explosion of a 1 megaton bomb over Bristol would kill 100,000 people immediately.
Mick Jackson had already made a documentary about World War III. Nobody really took notice. It didn't change anything. But he felt that because he was working in the science department at the BBC, he had a unique opportunity to develop something that would hit home.
I went to the BBC and said, look, I'm going to go and research this, but I think it needs a drama to get into people's emotions and emotional state.
That's where Barry Hines stepped in.
Barry Hines was a Yorkshireman. Most of his work is based around South Yorkshire. It's one of the poorest regions in England. He understood working class life, especially in the north, its unique humour, its stoicism and its fragility. That's one of the reasons he worked so much with Ken Loach. Mick Jackson wanted the social realism that Barry Hines could bring. And as a member of the CND, he knew that the real horror of nuclear war wasn't the global politics. It's what would happen to the ordinary people, the people in the streets, the kids that play on their bikes and on the playgrounds, the young lovers and the elderly.
But what it is, I mean, it's the people in the middle, really. The people who don't know very much, who have not been concerned about it, who have the same attitude as the boy in the film who says, if it happens, I want to be straight underneath it and pissed out of my mind. They're the people I'm concerned with.
It begins in Sheffield, a city that, ironically, had declared itself one of Britain's first nuclear-free zones. And I had originally intended to film this in Sheffield. I spent the day and drove up there. It's filmed in Sheffield, but it was lousier weather than even today, and so I decided to can that. Jackson was an old-school, middle-class documentarian, so he decided to film it like one, with handheld cameras, unknown actors, and actual real people from Sheffield.
Come on, get it off. I'll have half. Half? What's up with you? Getting into training for when you're married?
17 days of shooting and a £250,000 budget, which was tiny, even by BBC standards, back in 1984. There's no stars and certainly no glamour. It's just the end of the world, played completely straight.
Has increased still further this evening. In a statement issued a short time ago by the Pentagon in Washington,
this was not a Hollywood apocalypse, it was a BBC one.
At first, Threads plays like a kitchen sink drama, just like anything else you'd have seen in the 1980s. Jimmy and Ruth are a young couple. They're engaged and expecting a baby.
Oh, I'd love to live out in the country, wouldn't you, Jimmy?
Would Nick?
Why not?
He's dead.
They get a flat and plan their future. All the while, in the background, the radio mumbles about troop movements and problems in the Middle East.
If the Russians don't move their forces out of Iran.
But no one's really listening.
That has disappeared whilst on routine patrol in the area.
It's just the news. Then comes the sirens. And in a matter of seconds, life becomes unimaginable. The flash. The blast. The firestorm. And after that, the silence. What follows next? Civil disintegration. The economy collapses, food runs out, and language itself begins to break down. By the time Ruth's child is grown, people can barely speak. Civilization has literally lost its voice. For years I used to think that The Grapes of Wrath was the most bleak ending to any story. And then I saw Threads.
What made and what makes Threads so disturbing isn't what it shows.
Money has had no meaning since the attack.
It's how it shows it.
The only viable currency is food, given as reward for work.
It feels like the traumatic public service announcements that we used to get in the 80s.
Climbing pylons can kill. Don't take a chance with electricity.
Every shot feels procedural, low budget and almost boring. It's like something the government would commission. And that functionality, that stripped back nature, it makes it unbearable.
In the last few days, emergency headquarters like this have been hastily improvised up and down the country.
It turns horror into data. The narration gives cold, factual updates.
Hanging in the atmosphere, the clouds of debris shut out the sun's heat and light. Across large areas of the northern hemisphere, it starts to get dark.
Which dehumanises it even more. It's the sort of thing a government would do. And that makes it even worse.
The BBC gave Mick Jackson and Barry Hines almost total freedom. No real political guidance. They just told him to make it right. And so they did.
Bloody hell.
Boy, they did. It took 17 days of shooting, mostly on real Sheffield streets. There was minimal effects. Everything was practical and improvised. Hundreds of extras lying down pretending they were dead. The mushroom cloud was a blend of miniature and stock footage, and the makeup team created radiation burns using everyday cosmetics. They studied the documentaries from Hiroshima to make sure that they were accurate. When editing finished, the executives weren't sure what they had, a drama, a warning, or something closer to a public information film. They aired it anyway, on a Sunday night, 23rd of September 1984 on BBC Two.
Good evening. Threads is a drama. The characters and events are fictional, and it deals with something that has never happened. But it draws on a vast amount of scientific information.
When it aired, Britain stopped. 6.9 million people watched. The most for any BBC Two programme that week. And remember, this is back when there were only 4 channels on the TV. The Radio Times, the UK's equivalent of the TV Guide, ran an iconic front cover. When it was first broadcast, I was a kid. My bedroom was above the living room, and downstairs I could hear that my parents were watching the film. I used to lie on the floor and put my ear against the carpet and listen to what they were listening to. On this particular night, it was Threads. And just listening to it, it traumatised me as a child.
Over the past 4 days, neither the President nor his senior staff will have had more than a few hours rest. This is when they may be asleep.
The sirens, the screams, and then the silence afterwards.
Is it for real? Attack warnings for bloody real.
When I finally watched it years later, it was one of those rare instances where reality is actually worse than your imagination. It's that bad. The week after, viewers wrote to the BBC in droves. The whole nation was in a state of shock. Parents had turned off the television halfway through. though mine clearly didn't. Teachers asked for a copy to show in school, and even the Ministry of Defence requested a print.
For some time after the film, there was an eerie tension. People were shocked, waiting perhaps for someone to reassure them, to say this isn't true.
Across the Atlantic, Ted Turner wanted to show it on TBS, but nobody would sponsor it, and so he stumped up the cash himself.
Of nuclear confrontation and in an effort to promote world peace. This film, produced in Great Britain, is called Threads.
It even seemed to rattle the man at the top. Shortly after it was broadcast, Ronald Reagan gave a speech that was noticeably less aggressive than expected. The Times marked the moment with a cartoon showing one man reading Reagan's peace speech and another asking, "Do you think he saw Threads?" Normally I would say why I like a particular film. In honesty, I don't like Threads. It left scars like no other film.
What's the following items in your fallout?
When I was 10 years old, shortly after I'd watched Threads, I was in a music lesson at school. I remember it so vividly. There was, out of nowhere, the air raid siren sounded out. Now, half the class had seen Threads, the other half hadn't, but the half that had seen it started to panic. Their faces just drained of colour. The teacher stood up and ran out of the classroom, just left us alone. That was the longest 5 minutes of my life. And we just sat there. The ones that knew just sat there panicking, just thinking this was it, this was the end. Later, she came back and she explained that there was a special man who went round with a little gold key, and every now and then he tested the air raid siren. She might have told us that before.
Before Threads, filmmakers had been trying to imagine nuclear war for almost 3 decades and kind of failing in different ways. In 1959, On the Beach showed the world's last survivors waiting for radiation to drift south. Gregory Peck and Ava Gardner were doomed, but actually quite glamorous. Then in 1964 came Failsafe, a great film. Sid Little Met stripped the bomb of all its spectacle and just showed a bunch of men in rooms sweating over their decisions. Its Cold War morality rendered as a game of chess. That same year, in '64, Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove made the same story a farce. The end of the world is a black comedy. Personally, I've never found Dr. Strangelove particularly funny. Sellers is incredible, of course, but the jokes land fairly blunt. In Britain, The War Game was the first film to show what it actually might look like. Peter Watkins also shot it like a documentary, detailing an attack on Kent. The BBC banned it for 20 years, in spite of the film winning Best Documentary at the Oscars. They called it too horrifying for public transmission. When it finally aired, it looked frighteningly like Threads. By the late 70s, nuclear dread had become a background noise. America gave us The Day After in 1983, broadcast to millions but still filtered through melodrama and hope. Mick Jackson almost stopped making Threads when he heard that The Day After was being made. Then he saw it and realised that Hollywood had done its Hollywood thing, and so he decided to continue with Threads. Critics at the time were divided.
Is there not a sense in which programmes like this, while seeking to alert the populace, succeed mainly in paralysing the will? It was not clear if the point of Threads was to frighten or inform. They're not incompatible aims, although I suspect they come under the larger heading of entertainment. By the end, we were a little better informed and a lot more worried. Answers were as far away as ever.
40 years on, Threads is still considered one of the most disturbing programmes ever broadcast. Students who watch it now, who were born long after the Cold War, still come away shaken.
Well, you try getting through to them. It's bloody awful.
It's often taught in film studies as the apex of British social realism, where documentary merges with narrative with a nightmarish effect.
40p? That's scandalous. There were only 26p last week.
You can always shop somewhere else, you know, if you're not satisfied.
And its influence runs deep. It's in Chernobyl, in Children of Men, even in the tone of modern disaster coverage, that factual horror, that steady voice over chaos. It began here. One of the 13-year-olds who watched it in 1984 was Charlie Brooker.
A lot of shows, most shows exist to reassure people.
He later said,
and I remember watching these things and kind of not being able to process what that meant, not understanding how society kept going and why people bothered going to work and feeding ducks and getting on buses and weren't just weeping and screaming.
And in a way, that's the point. Threads didn't predict the end of the world, but it made it feel possible. Hollywood has recently revisited the subject. Catherine Bigelow's latest film, A House of Dynamite, revisits the nuclear war story with the urgency of a real-time crisis. Unlike earlier dramas of the Cold War era, this begins with the launch of an unidentified missile heading for the United States and unfolds across the next 20 minutes, traced through 3 different narratives. Personally, I found it fairly frustrating, but I understand what she was trying to do. If nothing else, it's helped to bring the conversation back into the foreground.
The BBC just re-aired Threads as part of the anniversary of Hiroshima. It's the second time in 2 or 3 years. It's almost as if they're trying to tell us something. They've also broadcast The Omen several times, a film about the Antichrist becoming President of the United States. I'd like to think it was a coincidence. Happy Halloween.